And before we dive in, just a quick note that we have adjusted our meeting time today and coming forward to 11 a.m. UTC. So thank you all for accommodating this change. And we have got a packed agenda focused on following up from our discussions 2 weeks ago, with particular emphasis on O13.5 deployment stability, Cairo native progress, and the integration work happening across the ecosystem. So let's jump right in. And first, we'll have O13.5 mainnet deployment status with Leo. So, Leo, in our last call, you mentioned that there were some initial issues during the deployment that caused about 20 minutes of downtime. And you also mentioned that there was an ongoing investigation into some gateway related issues. So, now that we have had 2 weeks of production experience with O13.5, could you give us an update on overall stability and whether those gateway investigations have concluded? Leo? Okay, maybe we'll come back to this after Leo is available. So the next thing on our agenda is native implementation. So Ariel, when we spoke 2 weeks ago, you mentioned that replay testing was still in progress, but they were looking promising. So with no differences encountered at that point, you estimated that if testing continued to go well, we could see the test and deployment within 1 to 2 weeks. So followed by some extensive testing, including a potential shadow fork of mainnet. Could you update us on whether the replay testing has completed successfully and if there are any timeline for test and deployment on track?
Yes, so to be honest, the replay is moving slower than I expected, but so I think it's still not done, but no differences have been spotted so far with the 034. So even more promising than last time. Um, and yeah, I still don't have a date, but given that it will finally close, then we can start it on testnet. This doesn't require releases, if I remember correctly. I think it's just a config on the sequencer side, and yeah, nothing else beyond that.
Okay, and are there any initial performance metrics that you have from dictionary optimization work or recovery?
No, sorry, unfortunately, not yet. I still have the old numbers by Lambda class, which are
Mhm.
around, I think, 2x for transfers, 2 to 2.5x, and up to 10, 12x for more complicated contracts. But
Okay,
but yeah, I don't have
no
anything
worries.
anymore.
So does anyone have any questions about Cairo Native's progress that they would like to ask Ariel, or shall we proceed? So, okay, so I don't see anyone. So now let's check in with our client teams on their implementation progress. So, Christian, in our last call, you mentioned some interesting issues with Starknet Get Events call for certain RPC providers running Pathfinder. So, you also face some challenges with large block timeout issues. So, could you update us on the resolution of these issues? And since Adi mentioned Pathfinder's integration with Malachite would begin after O13.5, I'm curious if that work has kicked off yet or not.
Yeah, okay. So, yes, indeed, we did face some issues with Starknet Get events uh, that turned out to be a bug in one of the migration steps we are doing during updates. This has been fixed. And we have verified that the database snapshots we have published are okay. So if you are now upgrading with Pathfinder 0.16.3, then everything is okay, or should be okay. And the timeout issues have also been fixed with last week's Pathfinder 0.16.3 release. With Malachite integration, we are just starting working on that, like trying to implement context for Malachite and adding malachite into our build and so on. We have also done some progress with setting up our P2P code so that we can participate in the consensus network and just subscribe to the relevant topics and so on. So indeed, work has been started on that front. There were also a couple unrelated improvements. One is that we have created a tool for reconstructing L2 state diffs from L1 state. This is now available in the Starknet scrape repository on GitHub under the EQ Labs organization. The idea here is that this is a fully up-to-date tool that can download L1 blobs for Starknet state changes and do all the decoding and parsing to reproduce an L2 state diff for a range of blocks. Yeah, so if anyone's interested, take a look at that tool. And there have also been some progress in adding Cairo native integration into Pathfinder. This isn't available in the release yet, but it is something that is using the same version of Cairo native that Ariel has just mentioned that they are testing. It will not be enabled by default, but will be an option or an opt-in thing that users can enable if interested. That's all for Pathfinder.
Okay. And also the tool that you were mentioning is it is the same tool on which VecLab was working like last meeting,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. It is now available in the public repository, and it is correctly handling both stateless and stateful compression. So it is up to date with the latest Starknet versions.
Okay. We actually have a separate agenda on this, a separate topic on this agenda for VecLab to explain about that. So that's perfect. Okay. So thanks, Christian. And Rodrigo, for the Juno team, you mentioned you were developing a dynamic timeout window to address the large block handling issues. So how's that implementation coming along, and what's been your general experience with O 13.5 in production?
Yeah, so that we added like a dynamic timeout so that if the sequencer retries fails a lot, then let's try to increase the bit to try. This is also, of course, optional. It can be specified through flags. It's also specified all in the documentation. We can also allow for having like specific timeouts if you want. Like if you want to have 5, 10, like the user have full control over the timeouts they want in the case it happens on the future. We also are allowing support for the user to change the timeout during dynamically, so they don't have to shut down the node and restart it. So they can just send an HTTP request and change the timeout in case that's the issue. By the way, you can also do that with the logging. So if you want to change logging at any point, all this in the Juno documentation. So yeah, so far in production, I think so far we have one reported bug which we are investigating, which is with estimate fee that we are looking at it. There is specific conditions in the request that causes estimate fee to not behave appropriately, so we are looking into it. On the other hand, we have been working on the staking V2, which is adding support for the tool, adding a bit of more clear signing, and adding trying to have like a very good UX so users can understand it very easily how to use it. So yeah, the final note we have through the past month we have been working on adding Juno like the ability to build blocks to perform as a kind of a sequencer. So now it's almost done. We have been working on that like this last PR, and probably part of the next release as an experimental flag, so people can use it. But that's on our side.
Okay. So I appreciate that update. And now Trantorian or Nathan, in our last call, you guys mentioned that Madara didn't get support O 13.5 and you were managing some development across multiple teams. So could you share any progress on O
Yeah.
13.5 support and give us an update on the latest test network?
Yes, so recently, as you know, we did not follow up the core, but we are still focusing on stabilizing and improving Madara for Starknet Stack clients. But the good news is that now we are getting back to the core. We have a pipeline to recover to the latest Blockifier version, and this includes, of course, for the entire Starknet stack, upgrading Snows for 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 processing the latest version blocks. So this is a pretty good news for the other open source clients. One thing is that we are not standing by, but we are. We really want to focus on stabilizing Madara for the Stack and Stack. So the P2P consensus and native current tracks are a bit standby. They are you can check them. They are well advanced, so I think that it will be easy to recover. They are on PR 463 for P2P, 487 for native, and 475 for Malachite. So we did a lot of progress on them, and we will get back to them probably by the end of the month to get ready for the next versions. But yeah, Madara is back to the core, and that's something that's a good news.
Okay. Thank you for the update, Nathan. And does anyone have any questions for any of the client teams? Leo, Ariel, anyone? Okay. So let's move on to the next point on the agenda, which is actually P2P protocol chain ID implementation. But since Shahak is not available, we'll be skipping this part. And the next point on the agenda is Malachite consensus integration. So Adi, you shared in our last call that you had completed the first integration of interoperability tests between Papyrus and Malachite with successful block production. And you mentioned plans for more in-depth testing, including latency tests, larger networks, and non-empty blocks. So you also referenced the ongoing work on ADRs and liveness in sub-protocol reviews. So could you share the results of that extended testing and the status of your integration work with client teams?
Sure. Yeah. So there's multiple points. I'll try to keep it brief then. On interop tests with Papyrus, we now have a setup that allows us to spawn a network with a bit more dynamic setup, because it used to be static with just a predefined amount of nodes. We haven't added latency yet, as far as I know. Actually, no, we can define precise latencies, but those latencies have to be defined kind of ahead of time before the experiment starts. I think that's pretty good for the beginning. It might just get us all the way to really real world, almost simulating interop tests. What else? We noticed that the consensus finalization is slower when the sequencers are mixed, when there's this heterogeneous network. So we need to do a bit more investigation to figure out why, when we add latency, there's this slowdown. I think those are the two main things. So setup, latencies, and found this slowdown. The ADRs have been merged, and there's ADR 003 and 004. One of them tackles specifically how a value, which is a block, in practice, Malachite calls it a value because it's supposed to be agnostic to the exact data that is disseminated or finalized. So yeah, ADR 003 focuses on the value propagation mechanisms, and there's different ways that an application built on top of Malachite can choose to propagate the value. For Starknet, we'll be using the streaming approach, but there is support to do other approaches as well. And we may want to experiment with others as well. So that's ADR 003 and 004, which was also merged. And I pinged the two teams about both of these. So ADR 004 concerns with a higher level description of the coroutine based process to drive the low level API in Malachite. Basically describes how do you actually build an application using the low level library APIs in Malachite. There's a couple of other, I guess, updates that I could give. One of them is we investigated whether a certain feature called timeout commit whether it's useful for anything. I'm not going to give context on where that feature comes from or why, but we basically just found out that pretty much no team will likely need timeout commits, and we will likely remove it in a future release. And yeah, we also did a 0.1.0 release. This is the first patch release. Before this, we just had 0.0.1. So it was the, before we had just the patch release, now we have a minor release. So the APIs are getting more and more stable. And the other update I could give here is we scoped what DevNet would look from our side, specifically just for testing Malachite in a long-running kind of battery of tests in a long-running network. We have a dummy sequencer that we wrote using Malachite that is the one that we're using actually in the interrupt tests. But given that the interrupt test mostly focuses on interoperability and there is no explicit effort that tests Malachite on its own, on how it's stable, whether all the edge cases that we need to be covered are covered, we're going to do this DevNet a bit separately. Using the same software, the dummy Starknet sequencer that we built ourselves. I think that covers everything. I'm glad to go into any detail. I know I said a lot of stuff there. I suspect we might have lost Ayush because at least the image is frozen from what I can tell. Is it just me?
No, looks frozen.
Yep.
I think that was the last thing on the agenda. Let me check. No, we still have the data extraction tool. So I guess we can move to talk about that if you have any.
Okay, as Christian mentioned, we've released the tool last week. I've posted it on the chat if you want to try it out. It should be supporting all the blob-based formats, including stateless and stateful compression. And so you can try it out. Obviously, it's version 0.1, so it has stuff missing, some optimizations. It could be extended for all the data and so on. But I think it's usable as it is. If you have some problems, let me know, or just raise an issue on GitHub. That's basically the whole update.
Very nice. So it works from O13.1 onwards?
Sorry?
So it works from O13.1 onwards?
Yes, exactly.
Amazing. Cool. We'll try it out. Okay, I think that covers everything. I actually don't know what the last point in the agenda is. So if someone can tell me what A or B stands for, we can talk about that.
I think it's any other business, if I recall correctly.
Okay, so anything else anyone wants to bring up? Okay, well, then I guess this is it for today. So thank you guys, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yes.
Everyone.
Cheers, everyone.